That's my dad's drawing. The words stopped everything. The projector's hum, the soft shuffle of papers, even the clicking of the CEO's pen. Silence swallowed it all. At the front of the boardroom, the prototype glowed on the screen, a gleaming car model marked with a delicate looped signature in the corner. Evelyn Cross, CEO of Crosstech, slowly turned toward the voice. A little girl stood in the doorway, clutching a sketchbook to her chest. Her backpack was half-zipped, her hair a mess from running. He signs the corners like that, she added, pointing at the design. Across the room, the janitor froze. Daniel Hale's mop handle slipped from his grip, landing with a hollow clatter on the marble floor. His face went white. "Lina," he whispered, voice cracking. "Not now, sweetheart." But she didn't move. Her clear eyes stayed on the screen. "You told me you made this when you were an engineer." A few executives chuckled under their breath, awkward and unsure. Evelyn didn't. Her gaze flicked from the screen to Daniel, then back to the small loop in the signature, an identical flourish she had seen on his employee file. "Mr. Hale," she said quietly, her tone cutting through the laughter, "stay after the meeting." The child's innocent truth hung in the air like thunder after lightning. The room, once full of power and pride, felt suddenly fragile, and as Daniel guided his daughter out with trembling hands, Evelyn kept staring at that tiny curved mark, the one that might belong to the man who mopped her floors. The next morning, the air inside Crosstech felt heavier than usual. Whispers rippled through the halls, quiet and sharp. Everyone had heard about the interruption during yesterday's board meeting. The janitor's daughter, the sketchbook, It sounded ridiculous, like gossip too strange to be true, but inside Evelyn Cross's office, it was no rumor. It was a question that refused to die. Daniel Hale stood just inside the doorway, cap in hand, eyes on the floor. His reflection glimmered in the polished black glass of the desk that separated him from Evelyn. The CEO leaned back in her chair, perfectly composed, though her expression was unreadable. "Mr. Hale," she began evenly, "your daughter made quite a statement yesterday." Daniel swallowed hard. "I've spoken to her, ma'am. She's a child. She doesn't understand what she saw." Evelyn's gaze was steady, clinical. She seemed very certain. Children often are when they're telling the truth. Daniel's fingers tightened around his cap. "With respect, ma'am, it was a misunderstanding. I'd never—" Evelyn raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "HR sent your file last night. I reviewed it." She tapped a folder on her desk. "Your signature is interesting." He didn't move. She opened the file and slid a sheet of paper across the desk toward him. It was his employment form, his name written neatly at the bottom. Next to it she placed a printed copy of the design file from the prototype presentation. Her fingertip landed on the same looping flourish at the end of the signature. "Identical," she said softly, "down to the smallest curve." Daniel's throat felt dry. "Coincidence," he managed. "Coincidence doesn't replicate handwriting," Evelyn replied, "especially not with this precision." For a long moment, only the faint hum of the air vents filled the room. Finally she leaned back. "You've worked here 5 years. Night shifts. No complaints, no requests for advancement. You keep your head down. That's admirable, and curious. I've seen men like you before, Mr. Hale, hiding something behind humility." Daniel's breath caught. "I'm just doing my job." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you?" He said nothing. Every muscle in his jaw worked to keep his expression neutral. She could sense the fear radiating off him. And yet there was something else, a quiet grief, old and deep, hiding beneath the surface. Evelyn closed the file. "Until further notice, you'll be placed on paid leave," she said. "HR will contact you if I need more information." He blinked, stunned. "Am I being fired?" "Not yet," she said coldly. "I don't fire people until I understand them." He nodded once, slow and stiff. "Yes, ma'am." As he turned to leave she added, "And tell your daughter, she's not in trouble, but next time, keep her out of corporate meetings." He paused in the doorway, back still turned. "Yes, ma'am." His voice was barely audible. Then he walked out, closing the door quietly behind him. Evelyn sat motionless for a moment, staring at the two papers side by side. The signatures seemed to mock her, mirror images refusing to explain themselves. She picked up her pen, tried tracing the shapes herself, and failed to replicate the confidence in the strokes. Whoever wrote the original had been precise, practiced, gifted. A janitor, she thought. A janitor, with a hand like that. She pushed the papers away and rose, pacing to the window. Outside, the skyline glittered, Crosstech's name on half the towers. Her father's legacy. Her legacy. Every light she saw had been built on the innovations of this company. If there was a lie buried beneath all that glass and steel, it could shatter everything. Down in the lobby, Daniel walked slowly through the echoing marble corridor. Head low, the other staff avoided his eyes. He felt them watching, the pitying looks, the cautious whispers. He'd lived invisible for years. Now all at once, he was seen for the wrong reason. Outside, the sunlight was too bright. He stepped into it and exhaled shakily. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. He had built a life from silence, carefully brick by brick, and one small voice had knocked the first stone loose. The secret he'd guarded for half a decade was no longer safe. As the automatic doors slid shut behind him, Daniel knew the truth he'd buried had begun to breathe again, and it wouldn't stay quiet for long. Evelyn didn't wait a day. By noon, she'd summoned Daniel back into her office. He entered quietly, cap in hand, shoulders drawn tight. Her voice was sharper this time, the edge of patience gone. "Sit." Daniel obeyed. The blinds were half closed. The light that filtered through made the air look pale and cold. On the desk lay 2 sheets of paper, the same patent design and his employment form still side by side. "I want the truth," Evelyn said. "Who are you really?" "I'm Daniel Hale, ma'am. Maintenance." Her tone cut through the lie. "You're an engineer. That signature isn't an accident. You've been here 5 years. Never late. Never promoted. Never noticed. A man hides like that for a reason." "Why?" Daniel's hands trembled on his knees. He wanted to deny it again, but exhaustion pressed the words out of him. "I did work in research once. Before all this. Another company. Another life." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "What company?" He looked down. "It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me." Silence stretched. The hum of the office faintly carried through the door, distant voices moving like ghosts. Finally he said, "It was under a different name. That's all I can tell you." Her expression didn't change, but her disappointment filled the space between them. "You think you can hide behind that mop forever?" Daniel flinched. "With respect, ma'am, it's not hiding, it's surviving." Evelyn studied him for a long time. The calm precision of her posture didn't soften the words that followed. "You'll have 24 hours. Tomorrow morning, you'll come back and tell me exactly what I need to know. Who you worked for, why that signature matches mine, and why your daughter recognized my design. If you don't, HR will terminate your employment immediately." He rose slowly, every movement stiff. "I understand." "Do you?" she asked quietly. "Because if you're lying, Daniel, it won't just cost you this job. It will ruin you." He met her eyes for the first time. "It already did," he said. For a moment she saw the truth flicker there. Grief, guilt, and something else she couldn't name. Then he turned and left. When the door closed, Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She stared again at the matching signatures, twin ghosts of an old deception. The janitor's quiet fear had felt too real to be performance. Something inside her whispered that this was bigger than pride, bigger than theft. Down in the service corridor, Daniel leaned against the wall, shaking. He'd spent years burying his past, changing his name, learning how to be invisible. And now, because of one innocent comment, the walls he'd built were crumbling. If Evelyn dug deep enough, she'd find the truth, and if she found it, others would too. He walked out of the building into the thick evening air. The city lights blinked like watchful eyes. He thought of Lena waiting for him, of her voice in that boardroom so small and fearless. Tomorrow he would have to choose between silence and exposure. Either way, the life he'd built on secrecy was ending. That night Daniel sat at the small kitchen table long after dinner had gone cold. The clock ticked steadily in the corner, the kind of sound that fills a room when everything else has fallen silent. Lena was in her room, humming as she sorted her pencils, her sketchbook open on the floor. He turned his wedding ring slowly around his finger, thin now from years of wear, and tried to remember the last time he'd told the truth about himself out loud. "Dad?" Lena's voice came softly from the hallway. "Are you mad at me?" He looked up, startled. She stood there in her pajamas, clutching her sketchbook like a shield. "You weren't supposed to come in that room," he said gently. "But no, honey, I'm not mad." She frowned. "Did I get you in trouble?" He hesitated, then patted the chair beside him. "Come here." She climbed up, legs swinging. "The lady in the suit looked scared," she said. "Did you draw that car?" Daniel stared at the wall for a long time before answering. "A long time ago, yes." Her eyes widened. "Really? Then why didn't you tell her?" He smiled faintly, but there was no joy in it. Because sometimes telling the truth costs more than staying quiet. Lena tilted her head. But it's your work. He nodded slowly. It was, before I changed my name. She blinked in confusion. You changed your name? He took a breath. I used to be called Daniel Hart. I was an engineer. I helped design a program that keeps cars from losing control in bad weather. We called it the adaptive safety algorithm. I wrote most of the core code myself. Lena's eyes shone. Like the one from today. Exactly like that. His voice grew tight. I worked with a man named Holt Mercer. He was my friend, or I thought he was. We started that project together when Crosstech was just a lab with 3 computers and a dream. But then your mom got sick. He paused, the words heavy in his chest. While I was taking care of her, Holt filed the patents himself. He changed the author names, rewrote the metadata, and told the board I'd had a breakdown. When I came back, I didn't even recognize my own code. It was all stamped with his signature. What did you do? Lena whispered. I tried to fight it. He rubbed his temple. But your mom was dying and I couldn't afford lawyers. I thought I'd fix it later. Then she passed away before I had clear my name. After that I didn't have the strength to keep fighting. Lena's small hand found his. So you stopped. I disappeared. His voice cracked. I sold everything, changed our last name to Hale, and took the first job that would pay cash. I didn't want reporters or lawsuits or pity. I just wanted you safe. She looked down at the table, tracing circles with her finger. But you were supposed to be famous. He smiled sadly. Fame doesn't tuck you in at night, peace does. The old refrigerator clicked on, humming softly in the background. Daniel looked around the apartment, the peeling wallpaper, the stack of unpaid bills, the single framed photo of his wife smiling in a hospital bed. It wasn't much of a life, but it was one built on survival. Then why can't we keep the secret now? Lena asked quietly. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Because it's not just about me anymore. That company, the one with your mom's design pinned on every billboard, they built their fortune on something personal. Maybe I could ignore it before, but now, he looked at her. Now you've spoken the truth, and they heard it. I can't hide behind silence again. Lena hesitated. Will that lady, the boss, hurt you? He shook his head. No, she's not the enemy. She just doesn't know the full story. She nodded thoughtfully, then reached into her sketchbook and tore out a page. On it was a messy drawing of a car with her own tiny initials in the corner. Then when you tell her, she said, you can show her this. So she knows good people make things too. He laughed softly, even as tears blurred his eyes. You've got your mother's stubborn heart. Lena leaned her head against his arm. You'll fix it, Dad. You always fix things. He didn't answer. He just looked at the small drawing in her hand, the same dream he'd once chased, now drawn in crayon. When she finally went to bed, Daniel stayed awake until the sky turned pale. The city outside was beginning to stir, headlights flickering on like restless stars. He opened an old box from the top of the closet, its contents neatly wrapped in a faded cloth. A company ID card labeled Daniel Hart, senior engineer. A USB drive with his initials scratched on the back. A folded letter in his wife's handwriting that said only, keep building, no matter what they take. He closed the box and sat still for a long time. The silence he had once believed would protect them had become a prison. Tomorrow he would walk back into that office and face whatever came. For 5 years, he had survived by erasing himself. Now, because of one child's voice, the man he used to be was coming back to life. Evelyn couldn't sleep. The city lights outside her penthouse flickered across the ceiling, but her mind was trapped in that looping signature. It haunted her, that small curve at the end of a name, a shape that now carried a question she couldn't ignore. She finally gave up on rest and padded barefoot across the marble floor to her study. The walls were lined with binders, records, and her late father's old notebooks, handwritten pages that had guided the company from a garage project to a global name. She pulled one down at random, dust rising from its spine, and sat at the desk. The handwriting was neat, disciplined, full of small technical sketches. She flipped through pages of notes until something caught her eye. Collaboration halted. Engineer withdrew suddenly after personal tragedy. Brilliant mind vanished without warning. Her pulse quickened. She flipped back a few pages and saw another line written in her father's meticulous hand. D. Hart's adaptive sequence shows promise. We'll review with Mercer next week. Hart. The name sounded close enough to Hale to feel like an echo. She closed her eyes for a moment. Her father had been many things. Visionary, stubborn, fiercely ethical, but naive. Never. If this vanished engineer had been cheated, it couldn't have been by him, which meant someone else had pulled the strings. She turned on her computer and logged into the company's archive system. The interface was old, but she still knew every corner of it. Within minutes, she was looking at the original patent transfer documents from 15 years ago. The digital signatures looked ordinary, until she zoomed in on the scanned handwritten editions. Her stomach tightened. The signature labeled Daniel Hart had the same loop she'd memorized from yesterday. She leaned back in her chair, pressing a hand to her forehead. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidence. The janitor, the man she'd nearly fired, might have been the very engineer her father had mentioned all those years ago. At 2:01 a.m., she sent a secure message to the legal department's internal review division, requesting forensic verification of all early patents under the Cross-Tech Safety Algorithm series. Handwriting, metadata and authorship chain. Confidential, no external communication. By morning, the preliminary report was waiting in her inbox. Evelyn opened it with a sinking feeling. The report was concise, clinical. Several early documents show inconsistent authorship. Signature analysis indicates the name Daniel Hart was overwritten in at least one transfer form. Probability of forgery. Her hand tightened around the mouse. She scrolled further, each new page confirming her unease. Dates were altered, metadata replaced. The entire foundation of Crosstech's flagship innovation had been tampered with years before she'd taken control. Evelyn pushed back from the desk and stood by the window. The skyline she'd once admired now felt like an accusation. Every light, every reflection of her company's logo across the glass towers. Each represented the legacy she'd sworn to uphold. If her empire had been built on stolen work, then she wasn't the heir of brilliance but of theft. She remembered Daniel's face, humble, frightened, yet holding something painfully real in his eyes. His trembling voice when he said he was just doing his job. The way his daughter had spoken without wisight. "That's my dad's drawing." Evelyn rubbed her temples, the ache behind her eyes sharp. Her father's death had left her with responsibility, not closure. Now it seemed he'd also left her with a buried truth she was never meant to find. She turned back to the desk, closing the report, but not the doubt clawing at her. For years she'd believed her leadership was a continuation of her father's integrity. Now she wasn't sure if she was preserving his legacy or repairing his mistake. As dawn crept through the window, the light glinted across the corner of the report, highlighting one line she couldn't ignore. Primary collaborator Holt Mercer. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Mercer had been her father's trusted partner. He'd also been the one who insisted on managing the original patent transfers. Her father may not have been the thief, but he had been deceived. Evelyn sat down again, calmer now, but the calm was ice cold. She opened her planner and wrote a single note under today's date. Find the truth, no matter the cost. Outside, the city woke to another day of work. Inside, Evelyn Cross prepared to dismantle the story she'd been told her entire life. Daniel arrived early the next morning, expecting to be escorted out. Instead, Evelyn Cross was waiting for him alone in her office. No board members, no HR, just her. He hesitated in the doorway, uncertain. "Ma'am, if this is about—" "It is," she interrupted. Her voice was calm, but something in her tone had changed. "Close the door, Mr. Hale. Please." He obeyed. The quiet click of the latch sounded heavier than it should have. Evelyn gestured toward the seat across from her. "Sit." Daniel did, folding his hands in his lap. He looked exhausted, but alert, like a man who had been preparing for this moment his whole life. "I ran a full audit last night," she began. "Patent records, handwriting, my father's archives. There was a name, Daniel Hart. Yours." He froze. The air between them turned still. "I don't know why you changed your name," she continued softly, "but I do know one thing. Someone forged your signature, and someone made my father believe that the work he bought was legitimate." His throat tightened. "You believe me?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "I believe enough to investigate." He stared at her for a long moment, trying to read her face, waiting for the catch. "Why?" "Because if my company is built on someone else's pain, I need to know. And because I saw your daughter's eyes yesterday. Children don't lie that cleanly." Daniel exhaled shakily, rubbing his palms together. "You're putting yourself at risk. Holt Mercer doesn't let ghosts come back to life. He'll know you're digging." "I'm already digging," she said simply, "and I don't plan to stop." For the first time, his fear turned into something else. Resolve. "Then you'll need to know what he's capable of." He told her everything in careful, measured words. The years of partnership, the accident that took his wife, the long nights spent rebuilding an algorithm from grief, the betrayal, the lawsuit he couldn't win, the lens that followed. Evelyn listened without interrupting, her pen motionless on the desk. When he finished, she sat back, staring past him for a moment before speaking. My father trusted Mercer completely. He handled every acquisition, every deal. If he forged that sale, he did it under my father's nose, which means he'll do anything to cover it up, Daniel finished quietly. Their eyes met. For a moment they were not CEO and janitor. They were two people standing on opposite sides of the same wound. Evelyn broke the silence. If I open a formal investigation, Mercer will know. He's still on the board. He'll bury the evidence before we ever see it. Then we don't go through the board, Daniel said. We go through the past. People who were there, records that weren't digital yet. I still have one of the prototype drives from the original lab. If he didn't destroy everything, it might hold metadata, the early versions of my code. She leaned forward. You kept it? He nodded. Hidden in an old storage locker outside the city. I couldn't throw it away. Evelyn's eyes sharpened with purpose. Then that's where we start. Ms. Cross. Evelyn, she corrected. He blinked. Evelyn, if he finds out we're working together. He won't, she said firmly. This stays between us. No lawyers, no press. Not yet. We find proof first. Daniel hesitated, torn between gratitude and dread. You don't owe me this. Her gaze softened. Maybe not, but I owe the truth something. He nodded slowly. Then I'll help you, but you need to be ready for what comes next. I am. The words were steady, but inside Evelyn felt the tremor of everything she was risking. Her career, her father's reputation, her name. Still, the alternative was worse, to lead a company founded on deceit. Daniel stood to leave, but she stopped him. One more thing. If Mercer's still watching, he'll notice if I meet you again here. Do you have somewhere safe? He hesitated, then said, There's a small workshop I use on weekends. Old place. I do repairs for extra cash. No cameras, no traffic. Good, she said. Tomorrow night, I'll meet you there. Bring the drive. We'll see what's left on it. He looked at her, uncertain. You trust me? She gave a small, tired smile. You've already lost everything. That makes you the only person I can trust. Daniel didn't smile back, but something loosened in his face, like a man remembering what it felt like to be seen. When he left, Evelyn remained at her desk, staring at the faint sunrise painting the skyline in pale gold. The weight of what she was about to do pressed heavily on her chest, but beneath it a strange clarity took shape. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about redemption for both of them. Across town, Daniel walked home with the morning crowd, blending into anonymity once more. But inside he felt the pulse of purpose again. For years he had lived as a ghost of who he once was. Now, for the first time, someone believed him enough to help. Evelyn sought truth to reclaim her company's honor. Daniel sought it to reclaim his own name. Different reasons, same mission. And somewhere out there, Holt Mercer, the man who had buried them both in silence, would soon learn that his ghosts were done staying buried. The next week began like nothing had changed on the surface. But shadows had started to move. Holt Mercer sat in his glass-walled office high above the city, staring at a single image on his phone screen. Evelyn Cross and a man in janitor's coveralls entering a side entrance of an old storage facility. The photograph had been taken the previous night. His jaw flexed. So, he murmured, the ghost crawls out of his grave. Across the desk, his head of security shifted nervously. You want us to intervene? Not yet, Mercer said, voice smooth, almost lazy. Just watch. If they find something, I want it before they do. He leaned back in his chair, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. And make sure the janitor's daughter understands what happens when people dig up the past. That same morning, Daniel was walking Lena to school. She skipped ahead, swinging her backpack, chatting about a science fair project. He smiled faintly, though his mind was elsewhere, replaying the encrypted files he and Evelyn had recovered the night before. Fragments of code, timestamps, one corrupted video file. They were close. He dropped her off at the gate, watching her run toward her friends. For a moment, peace seemed possible. Until the phone call came. It was the school's front desk secretary, voice trembling. Mr. Hale, someone left a letter for your daughter in the office. No return address. Daniel's stomach went cold. A letter? Yes, sir. The envelope just said for Lena. The handwriting looked odd. Do you want us to open it? No, Daniel said sharply. Don't touch it. I'm coming. He ran the 4 blocks back, every nerve screaming. When he arrived, The secretary handed him a pale envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper. "Stop digging, or she won't make it to 12. His vision blurred. The words swam in front of him, printed in neat block letters. No signature, just a small drawn symbol in the corner, a crooked letter M. Mercer. Daniel crumpled the paper in his fist, shaking. The janitor was gone. What stood in his place was the man who had once built machines to save lives, and was now ready to fight to protect one. He called Evelyn immediately. She answered on the first ring. "Daniel, they threatened my daughter." Her silence was sharp. "Who?" "Mercer's people. He knows we're looking." "Are you sure?" Daniel's voice cracked with fury. "I spent years running from that man. I know his signature. He's watching us." Evelyn didn't hesitate. "I'll send security to the school." "No," Daniel snapped. "That'll make her a target. He'll expect that." He heard her exhale through the line. "Then what do you suggest?" "We move faster," he said, "before he buries what's left of the proof." There was a pause. Then Evelyn said quietly, "You sound different." "I've been afraid for 5 years," Daniel said. "I'm done being afraid." That afternoon, Evelyn met him in the old workshop again. She looked paler than usual, dark circles beneath her eyes. "My IT team found something in the recovered files," she said. "There's a hidden directory with Mercer's initials. It's encrypted with an old proprietary cipher, one only you could have written." Daniel's eyes widened. "Then he used my code to lock it. Can you open it?" "Given time," he said. "But time is what we don't have." He connected the salvaged hard drive to a battered laptop. Lines of code filled the screen, fragments of data, random symbols. His fingers moved quickly, instinctively, as though he'd never stopped being the man behind the algorithm. Evelyn watched silently. "You think Mercer sent the threat personally?" "I think he wants me scared enough to stop," Daniel said, eyes still on the screen. "He always used fear as leverage. He thinks people are predictable when they panic. And you're not?" He met her gaze. "Not anymore." They worked in tense silence for an hour. Finally, Daniel stopped typing. "There," he said. "One file decrypted." Evelyn leaned closer. The phone line read "Transfer Sequence Original." She clicked it open. The video was grainy, time-stamped from the year of the patent sale. The camera panned across a lab, Daniel's old workspace. A voice spoke from off-screen. "Record everything," it said. The frame shifted, showing Holt Mercer shaking hands with a company notary, sliding a set of papers across the table. "Sign here," Mercer said. "Our partner's indisposed. Tragic loss. I'll handle his end of the transaction." Daniel's voice in the background, distant, angry. "You can't, that's my code." Mercer's smile froze on screen, then turned to a snarl. "Not anymore." The video ended abruptly, the image cutting to static. Evelyn sat back, shaken. "That's enough to open a criminal inquiry." Daniel shook his head. "Not yet. He'll claim it's doctored. We need chain of custody proof, metadata, witnesses, anything. And now that he knows we have this, he'll strike harder." She looked at him steadily. "You could walk away, you know. You have your daughter. You could disappear again." He closed the laptop. "And leave him standing. Not this time." Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavy against the workshop windows. The sound filled the silence between them. Evelyn folded her arms. "Then we do this together. But if Mercer's people are watching, we can't meet here again." "I know somewhere safer," Daniel said. "A place he'd never think to look. The lab where it all started. It's abandoned now, but I still have the key." Evelyn gave a faint, grim smile. "Then that's where we finish this." He looked down at the crumpled note in his pocket, the one that had threatened his daughter's life. His hands were steady now. Fear had done its job. It had turned into fire. Across town, in his high-rise office, Holt Mercer watched the rain streak down the glass and sipped his coffee. "They'll move soon," he said to no one in particular. "Let them, ghosts don't scare me." But for the first time in years, his reflection in the glass looked uncertain, as though some part of him knew the past wasn't finished with him yet. The building stood like a forgotten monument, tall, hollow, its glass panels streaked with dust. The old Crosstech Research Annex had been sealed for years, condemned after a fire that destroyed all original project archives. Evelyn parked under the dim streetlight and cut the engine. The silence was heavy, broken only by the clicking of the cooling car. Daniel sat beside her, gripping the small flashlight in both hands. "You're sure no one's monitoring this place?" She nodded. "It was decommissioned before I took over. No security detail, no cameras, no power. Officially it doesn't exist." He gave a faint, humorless laugh. That's exactly how Mercer likes his secrets. They slipped through the rusted service entrance. The corridor smelled of dust and metal. Faded safety posters still clung to the walls. Evelyn led the way, her phone light casting long shadows that trembled across shattered tiles. They reached a lab door with a crooked nameplate, Project Sentinel, restricted access. Daniel froze. His throat tightened. This was it, he whispered. My lab. Evelyn's beam traced over toppled tables, scattered hardware and charred binders. Looks like someone wanted this erased. They almost did, Daniel murmured. He crouched beside a scorched workstation, brushing away ash. This was where Mercer's crew burned everything. But if we're lucky, not everything. He began checking drawers, prying open panels. The smell of old circuitry filled the air. Evelyn joined him, moving methodically through the debris. For a long time, the only sounds were scraping metal and their shallow breaths. Finally, Daniel's hand paused over a sealed compartment beneath a console. He pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside, wrapped in brittle thermal foil, was a small transparent crystal drive no larger than a coin. His heart skipped. He missed one. Evelyn leaned closer. What is it? It's a quantum data crystal. Mercer used them to store prototype backups before cloud encryption. This one's old. First-generation tech. If it survived, it could hold raw data, sessions or video logs. Can you read it? He shook his head. Not here. The readers were custom-built. I could make one, but it'll take time. Evelyn turned the crystal over in her palm, watching light refract inside it like a trapped spark. This could prove everything, or nothing, Daniel said quietly. If it's blank, we've risked everything for dust. A noise cracked through the stillness, faint but distinct. A metallic thud somewhere deeper in the corridor. Evelyn and Daniel froze. Another sound followed, the echo of a door shutting. She killed her flashlight. They waited, breathless in the dark. After a long moment, the silence returned. Probably wind, Daniel whispered. She didn't believe it. Let's move. They slipped back the way they came, every step measured. Evelyn's pulse pounded in her ears. She had grown up in buildings like this, where her father's voice once echoed over hums of machinery. Now it felt like walking through his ghost. At the exit, Daniel hesitated and looked back. I spent half my life in that room, he said softly, and the other half pretending it didn't exist. Then let's make sure the truth finally does, she replied. They stepped into the cold night air, the crystal drive clutched tight in Evelyn's pocket. Miles away in Mercer's penthouse, a notification flashed across his desk tablet. Unauthorized access detected. Cross-tech archive site. He frowned and tapped the screen. A security feed, grainy infrared, showed two human silhouettes moving through the annex. One of them, tall, slender, unmistakably Evelyn Cross. Well, he murmured. Curiosity runs in the family. His assistant entered. Sir, get me the fail-safe records from Site 3B, Mercer said. If they found something, I want to know what it is before they figure out how to open it. Yes, Mr. Mercer. And have someone remind Mr. Hale that ghosts don't stay quiet forever. Back in Evelyn's apartment, the lights were dim, the city outside quiet, under rain. Daniel placed the crystal on the kitchen table like it was sacred. This is it, she whispered. If there's still data, it'll be fragile, he said, pulling an old laptop and makeshift reader from his satchel. It'll take hours to decrypt safely. You've done this before? He smiled faintly. You don't forget your own code. As he worked, Evelyn poured coffee but didn't drink it. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. You realize what this means if it's real. He nodded. It means your father wasn't the thief. He was the victim. Mercer used him the same way he used me. And if it's empty, Daniel paused. Then we still tell the truth. We just do it without proof. She studied him, this quiet man who had once swept her floors, now rebuilding the story her empire was built on. Why keep fighting after all this time, she asked softly. He didn't look up. Because if I stop, my daughter grows up thinking silence keeps you safe, and I won't let that be her lesson. The computer beeped faintly. A progress bar appeared. Decryption initializing 1% complete. Evelyn leaned in. Is that good? It's something, he said. If the sectors were dead, it wouldn't move at all. She exhaled slowly, some of the tightness in her chest easing. For the first time, hope didn't feel foolish. But hope was fragile. Across town, Mercer's network team broke through the system firewall at the abandoned annex. The access ping had left a trace, one that led straight back to Evelyn's IP. Within minutes, her location was on Mercer's screen. He smiled thinly, watching the coordinates blink. So that's where the ghosts live. He closed the laptop and stood smoothing his tie. Let them dig. I'll bring the shovel. Hours passed. The rain outside softened to mist. Daniel dozed off in his chair, exhaustion finally catching up. Evelyn sat nearby, watching the small crystal under the glow of the laptop screen. The progress bar crawled toward 100. At 3:17 a.m., the screen flashed. Decryption complete. One file recovered. Evelyn leaned forward, heart racing. Daniel, wake up. He blinked awake instantly. What is it? She pointed. The phone line appeared. Log entry 015. Mercer negotiation. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Play it, she whispered. Daniel hesitated, staring at the screen. His hand hovered over the mouse. If this is real, he said quietly, the world we know ends tonight. He clicked. The screen flickered, filling with static before resolving into an image. A conference table, two men in suits. One was her father. The other, Holt Mercer, younger, smiling. The audio was faint but clear. Daniel's not signing, Mercer's voice said. His wife's dying. He won't fight. Her father's reply was weary. If this isn't clean, Holt, I don't want it. Mercer laughed. Then don't look too closely. The video cut off. Evelyn sat frozen. Her father's last words echoed in the stillness. Daniel closed the laptop slowly. We have what we need. Evelyn met his gaze. Her voice was barely a whisper. Then the past isn't buried anymore. Outside, far below, the headlights of a black car slowed to a stop in front of her building. Mercer had found them. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the computer. Evelyn and Daniel sat frozen, staring at the flickering playback window. The crystal drive emitted a faint blue pulse, as if it carried its own heartbeat. Evelyn swallowed hard. There's another file. Daniel leaned closer. Where? She pointed at the screen. A new entry had appeared beneath the first video. Audio memo. J. Cross Private Archive. Dated 14 years ago. Her father's name. Evelyn's hand trembled on the mouse. I didn't know he ever recorded personal logs. Daniel's voice was steady. Play it. She clicked. A burst of static filled the room. Then her father's voice, calm, heavy with fatigue. If anyone finds this recording, it means the truth has finally caught up to us. My name is Jonathan Cross, and I need to confess something. Evelyn's breath caught. Her father's tone wasn't confident or rehearsed. It was weary, breaking at the edges. 5 years ago, I approved the purchase of an adaptive safety system from Holt Mercer. He claimed full rights. He presented documents, patents and signatures, all legitimate, all verified. But I knew, from the first moment I read the code, I knew it wasn't his. It was too refined, too human. Mercer doesn't build like that. He calculates. Whoever created it built it from grief, not greed. I should have stopped it. Daniel's chest tightened. He closed his eyes. I confronted him once. He showed me a signature and a letter from the supposed inventor, a man named Daniel Hart, claiming he'd sold everything voluntarily. Mercer swore it was clean. I didn't believe him. But by then we were public. Investors, contracts, millions on the line. If I exposed him, the company would have collapsed. So I stayed quiet. I told myself I'd make it right someday. The voice faltered. If you're hearing this, Evelyn, I'm sorry. You inherited a legacy I built on someone else's genius. His name deserves to be restored. The technology you lead today, it belongs Daniel Hart. Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes filling. Her father's last words were faint, barely audible. Do what I couldn't. Tell the truth. The recording ended with a click. No one spoke. The silence was unbearable. Evelyn sat perfectly still, staring at the dark monitor. Her breath came shallow, uneven. He knew, she whispered. He knew all along. Daniel looked down at his hands, knuckles white. He was trapped like I was, he said quietly. Different prison, same guilt. Evelyn shook her head. No, he chose to protect the lie, and I've spent years defending it. Every speech, every product launch, I've been praising a theft. Her voice cracked, and for the first time the confident CEO vanished. What was left was a daughter grieving not for her father's death, but for the truth he had buried. I spent my whole life trying to live up to him, she said softly. And now I find out I've been standing on someone else's work, on your work. Daniel reached across the table. Evelyn. She looked up, eyes rimmed red. You didn't steal anything, he said gently. You inherited a wound. You didn't cause it. Her lip trembled. But I built my success on it. He shook his head. Then use that success to make it right. Evelyn closed her eyes, pressing her palms together as if praying. The image of her father's handwriting still burned in her mind. "Tell the truth," she whispered. "It'll destroy everything he built. Then rebuild it," Daniel said simply. "The right way this time." She looked at him, the man she had once seen as invisible, now the only person in the world who understood the cost of silence. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Evelyn exhaled, her voice trembling but sure. "We expose Mercer. Publicly. No lawyers. No settlements. The world will see the proof." Daniel nodded. "He's watching us already. Which means he'll try to get ahead of it. We have one chance to make the evidence impossible to bury." Evelyn's mind shifted into focus, the strategist awakening again. The upcoming Future of Mobility Summit. It's in 3 days. Mercer's giving a keynote. Live broadcast. Every major network will stream it. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He'll use it to launch something new. That's how he operates. Bury old crimes under fresh glory. Then that's where we stop him. Evelyn opened a secure folder on her tablet, typing quickly. "We'll time the release. The recording, the documents, the footage, everything at once. We leak the truth while he's on stage." Daniel hesitated. "That recording mentions your father by name. It'll ruin his legacy." "I know," her voice broke, but she didn't waver. "But he asked me to tell the truth. I owe him that much." Daniel studied her for a long moment, the same woman who had once interrogated him with suspicion, now sitting across from him with tears and resolve. He said quietly, "You sound like your father, just not the part Mercer bought." A sad smile crossed her face. "Let's hope I can be the part he meant to be." Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon. Rain lashed the windows, blurring the city lights. Evelyn copied the files to a secure drive and handed it to Daniel. "Keep this safe. If anything happens to me." He stopped her. "Don't finish that sentence." "Daniel." "No." His voice was firm now. "You've done enough carrying guilt that wasn't yours. We both walk into this, or neither of us does." Their eyes met, a pact forged in exhaustion and resolve. Evelyn nodded slowly. Then together. Daniel stood and looked out the window, watching lightning flash over the skyline. "He'll come after us before the summit," he said. "You know that." She joined him. "Let him. This time he won't be fighting ghosts." Behind them the computer screen dimmed, the last frame of the audio log frozen, her father's initials glowing faintly beside the words, "Private Archive." Evelyn touched the screen softly, whispering, "I'll finish what you couldn't." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "And I'll make sure he never silences anyone again." They stood there, side by side as the storm outside deepened, the storm that would break over them in 3 days' time. For Evelyn, it was about justice. For Daniel, redemption. And for both of them, it was finally about truth, no matter what it cost. The Future of Mobility Summit gleamed beneath chandeliers and camera lights, a temple of innovation built on glass and ego. Reporters swarmed the atrium, investors clinked glasses, and 100 headlines were already being drafted before the first speech began. At the center of it all stood Holt Mercer, polished, poised, practiced. His tuxedo was immaculate, his smile disarming. For most of the industry, he was the man who had changed the world. For Evelyn Cross and Daniel Hart, he was the man who had stolen it. From the back of the ballroom, Evelyn adjusted her earpiece, her voice calm but tight. "Audio levels are clean. Stream link confirmed." Daniel's reply came through softly. "Copy that. The video is ready. Once he begins his announcement, give me the signal," she said. "I know the cue," he murmured. They had rehearsed it for 3 nights straight. One confession, one projection, one truth that would end a kingdom. The crowd hushed as Mercer stepped up to the podium. "Good evening, everyone." His voice was rich and smooth, the tone of a man utterly certain of applause. "Tonight, we stand on the brink of a new era, an era of safety, compassion, and innovation." Evelyn stood just beyond the light, near the AV booth. Daniel watched from a service balcony above the crowd, his old engineer's badge clipped under a borrowed name tag. He could feel his pulse syncing with the rhythm of Mercer's speech. "This industry has always been about saving lives," Mercer continued. "But technology means nothing without heart, which is why tonight, I'm proud to announce the creation of the Mercer Foundation for Road Safety." A logo bloomed across the giant screen behind him, a glowing emblem that read "Driven by Humanity." The audience erupted in polite applause. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Heart," he said. "Humanity." The man had none. On stage, Mercer lifted a glass of champagne. With this foundation, we'll invest millions into safer systems, advanced AI prevention, and public awareness programs. Together, we'll ensure. Now, Daniel whispered into the mic. Evelyn pressed the button. The screen behind Mercer flickered. The logo vanished. For a heartbeat, static filled the air, and then her father's voice echoed across the hall. If anyone finds this recording, it means the truth has finally caught up to us. Conversations died mid-sentence. Heads turned. Mercer froze, his smile twitching. My name is Jonathan Cross, and I need to confess something. The words reverberated through the ballroom. The screens showed an old man seated at his desk, face drawn with regret. The adaptive safety system was never Mercer's work. It was created by a man named Daniel Hart. Mercer forged the sale, and I let it happen. Gasps rippled across the crowd. The name Daniel Hart flashed in the subtitles beneath the footage. Cameras swung toward the stage. Reporters began whispering furiously into their recorders. Mercer's color drained. Cut the feed, he hissed toward the AV team. Now. But the technicians weren't moving. Evelyn's team had locked the controls. To whoever hears this, Jonathan Cross's voice continued, trembling now. Tell the truth. My daughter deserves the truth. The video froze on the final frame. Jonathan Cross looking directly into the camera as if staring straight through time into the eyes of everyone who'd built their success on a lie. The room was silent, the silence before a storm. Then chaos. Reporters surged forward. Mr. Mercer, did you forge the patent? Was the invention stolen? Who is Daniel Hart? Mercer tried to speak over them, hands raised. This is a fabrication. A deep fake. You're all being. But another screen lit up. This time, footage from the recovered lab appeared. Mercer's younger face, his voice unmistakable. Daniel's not signing. His wife's dying. He won't fight. Then her father's reply, faint but damning. If this isn't clean, Holt, I don't want it. Then don't look too closely. The video cut off. The audience erupted. A wave of disbelief, murmurs and outrage crashing through the hall. Flashbulbs exploded like gunfire. Daniel watched from above, hands gripping the railing. He didn't feel triumph, only release. For 5 years he'd lived as a ghost. Now, the world could finally see him. Mercer tried to leave the stage, but the exits were already blocked. Federal agents moved through the crowd, badges flashing. Evelyn's call had gone out 30 minutes before the broadcast. A timed report sent to federal oversight, encrypted with the recovered data. Mr. Holt Mercer, one of the agents called, voice steady through the chaos. You're under investigation for fraud, falsification of federal patents, and obstruction. Mercer turned pale. You can't do this here. The agent's reply was cold. You did. As Mercer was escorted down the stage steps, reporters pressed microphones toward him. Is it true the algorithm wasn't yours? Did you exploit the Hart family? Was Jonathan Cross covering for you? He didn't answer. His voice, so commanding minutes ago, had vanished. He kept his head down as cameras followed his every move. Evelyn stepped out from the shadows. The crowd parted as she approached the podium. I'm Evelyn Cross, she said into the microphone, her voice firm, unshaken. My father was a good man who made a terrible mistake. Tonight, that mistake ends. The technology that saved millions of lives was created by Daniel Hart, the man my company owes everything to. A wave of stunned silence followed. She looked straight into the cameras. We will rebuild this company under his rightful name. The Crosshart Foundation will continue its mission, but this time, with truth. Applause started slowly, hesitant, then growing. People were standing now, clapping not for scandal but for courage. Daniel stepped down from the balcony, emerging into the open. Reporters turned their cameras toward him. He looked ordinary, plain suit, no entourage, but in that moment he stood taller than Mercer ever had. Evelyn gestured him forward. This, she said, her voice breaking slightly, is the man my father once called a ghost. Today he is the reason we can finally see clearly. Daniel stood beside her. The crowd was still. Cameras clicked. For a heartbeat, time itself felt suspended. Two people united by guilt, loss and a shared redemption. Mercer shouted from across the hall, struggling against the agents. You'll regret this. You'll destroy everything. Evelyn met his eyes. No, you already did. They led him away. Outside the hotel, the night air was sharp and electric. Reporters crowded the entrance, news vans blinking red and blue. Headlines were already appearing. Mercer exposed in live confession. Forgotten engineer vindicated. Crosstech inherits redemption. Daniel and Evelyn stepped through the back exit. away from the chaos. The noise of flashing cameras faded into the distance. She turned to him. It's over. He shook his head softly. No. It's finally begun. Evelyn frowned. What do you mean? He looked out over the skyline, lights reflecting in his eyes. Now we build something honest. Something that doesn't need erasing. For the first time she smiled. Not a corporate smile, not a practiced one, but the kind that came from exhaustion and peace. You realize, she said quietly, you just brought down one of the most powerful men in the industry in under a minute. Daniel exhaled, a faint smile touching his lips. It took me 5 years to make that minute. They stood side by side, the wind catching her hair, the sound of sirens fading into the city hum. The world would remember the scandal, the fall, the confession. But what mattered most was that somewhere, in that roaring crowd, truth had been heard and believed. For once the silence that followed wasn't shame. It was freedom. Morning light poured through the glass atrium of Crosstech headquarters, the same building where truth had once been buried, now reborn in the open. The company's new emblem glinted above the front doors, Crossheart Technologies, a fusion of two names that had once existed on opposite sides of betrayal. Daniel paused just inside the entrance, adjusting the collar of his crisp white lab coat. For years he had passed through this lobby pushing a mop bucket, invisible to the people who hurried past. Today employees nodded respectfully as he walked by, not out of fear or formality, but recognition. On the wall where Mercer's portrait once hung, a new display shone beneath soft light, the patent plaque for the adaptive safety system. Generation 2. 2 signatures shared the bottom line. Daniel Hart, Evelyn Cross. He stopped for a moment to look at it. His reflection wavered faintly in the polished surface, overlapping with Evelyn's. Looks good there, doesn't it? Her voice came from behind him. He turned to find Evelyn standing by the elevator, coffee in hand. The exhaustion of the last few weeks softened by relief. Still feels strange, he said. I spent years cleaning the floor under that wall. Never thought I'd see my name on it. Evelyn smiled faintly. You earned it. He shook his head. No, we did. They walked together toward the new research division. The space she'd promised would replace secrecy with transparency. The glass walls gleamed, revealing open labs filled with engineers collaborating freely, not competing for credit. Every door had a small plaque engraved with the team lead's name, followed by 2 simple words, work shared, work honored. When they entered the lab, applause broke out. Some of the staff had tears in their eyes. Others simply nodded with quiet respect. Daniel lifted a hand awkwardly. All right. I just came to check the calibration on the new sensors. Laughter rippled through the room, warm and genuine. Evelyn leaned toward him. You know they still can't get used to calling you Dr. Hart again. He chuckled. Neither can I. He crossed to the nearest workbench, examining the sleek module being tested. A smaller, faster version of the system he had designed years ago. The code now carried his name in the metadata, permanently documented, impossible to erase. Run the diagnostic sweep, he said, and make sure the adaptive grid recalibrates every 3 seconds, not 5. Safety shouldn't wait that long. A young engineer nodded enthusiastically. Yes, sir. Evelyn watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction. You sound like the man who used to train my father's best engineers. Daniel looked up at her, smiling. Maybe I am again. Later that afternoon, he stepped out onto the observation deck, overlooking the test track. Below, a fleet of prototype vehicles moved in perfect synchronization, each one guided by his refined algorithm. No collisions, no faltering signals, just balance and precision. Lena stood beside him, wearing a bright yellow visitor's badge and clutching a model car from the company gift shop. Her wide eyes followed the test vehicles as they maneuvered gracefully. They move like they're dancing, she said. They're listening to each other, Daniel replied. That's what safety really is, 1 part paying attention, 1 part trust. She smiled up at him. Like you and Miss Evelyn? Daniel laughed. Something like that. Evelyn joined them a few minutes later, holding 3 cups of ice cream from the cafeteria. Company policy, she said, handing one to Lena. No meeting is complete without dessert. Lena giggled. You're the nicest boss ever. Evelyn winked. Don't tell my board that. The 3 of them stood together, watching the cars move in synchronized loops. The hum of engines mixed with birdsong drifting from the open skylights. Lena looked up at her father. Are you happy now? Daniel didn't answer right away. He watched one of the cars stop perfectly at the edge of the course, sensors flashing green, no longer a symbol of loss, but of redemption. Yeah, he said softly. I think I am. A few weeks later, the company hosted its first open house event. Reporters, students, and local families toured the new labs. Transparency wasn't just a word on posters anymore, it was the foundation of every department. At the main entrance, a plaque dedicated to Evelyn's father read, "To those who built with courage, even when they faltered. To those who speak the truth, even when it hurts." When Evelyn unveiled it, her voice caught slightly, but she didn't hide it. "My father taught me that integrity isn't a gift, it's a choice. Today we choose it again." Applause filled the hall. Cameras flashed, not as weapons but as witnesses. Daniel stood beside her, hands clasped behind his back. When she finished speaking, she turned to him. "You should say something too." He blinked. "I'm not much for speeches." "You built the reason we're all standing here," she said gently. "That's enough." Daniel stepped to the podium, the crowd quieting. He looked over the faces, scientists, interns, journalists, and in the front row, Lina, watching proudly. "I used to think invention was about brilliance," he began, "about being the smartest in the room. But it's not. It's about doing something that helps people, even when no one knows your name." He paused, glancing at Evelyn. "Sometimes the hardest thing isn't building technology, it's rebuilding trust. This company lost that once. Now we're earning it back. Not through perfect machines but through honest people." The audience erupted into applause again. Evelyn smiled, not the polished kind for cameras, but the quiet one she used when she believed something deeply. That evening, after the event, the two of them walked through the quiet halls. The glass reflected the sunset, painting everything in shades of gold. "Your speech stole mine," Evelyn teased. Daniel chuckled. "I'll deny it under oath." They stopped at the patent display again. The twin signatures gleamed under the lights. Evelyn traced the etched letters of her father's name just above the title. "He would have been proud," Daniel said softly. She nodded. "Maybe not of how we got here, but of what we did with it." Daniel looked around at the lab beyond the glass. The hum of machines, the voices of new engineers, the energy of creation reborn. "You turned his company into what he wanted it to be." Evelyn smiled faintly. "You turned it into what it needed to be." For a moment silence stretched between them, peaceful, not heavy. "You ever think about what's next?" she asked. He exhaled, smiling. "I used to spend every day thinking about what I lost. Now I just think about what I get to build." Later that night, Daniel returned home with Lena. She ran straight to the small workbench in their living room, the same table where he had once tried to fix broken circuits under a single dim lamp. Now it was bright, neat, covered with tiny experiments of her own. "Look," she said proudly, "I made a model that uses sensors like yours. It stops when it sees my hand." He crouched beside her, eyes wide. "That's incredible." She pressed a small button. The toy car rolled forward and halted perfectly an inch before his fingers. He laughed, a sound that had been rare for too long. "You might be the real genius of the family. Maybe we can work together one day," she said. He brushed her hair from her face. "You already are." From the corner of the room, the framed newspaper headline caught his eye. "Truth restores Crosstech. The real inventor steps into the light." He didn't hate seeing it anymore. It wasn't about vindication, it was about closure. As Lena chattered on about her next project, Daniel's gaze drifted toward the window, the city glowing softly beyond. The world hadn't changed overnight, but something inside him had. The guilt, the fear, the endless silence, all replaced by purpose. The next morning, Evelyn stood before the company's board, finalizing new policies. Full authorship disclosure, open development archives, shared research recognition. Daniel watched from the side as she spoke, calm and resolute. "From now on," she said, "every name behind every idea will be remembered. No invention is built by one person alone, and no truth should ever need to hide again." When the meeting ended, she found Daniel waiting by the door. "How'd I do?" she asked. He smiled. "Perfect. Coming from you, that's saying something." They walked out together toward the balcony overlooking the city. Below them, the world moved on. Cars guided by the very system that had once cost him everything. Lena's words echoed in his mind. "They move like they're dancing." He smiled quietly. "Maybe they are." Evelyn followed his gaze. "What?" He shook his head, still smiling. "Just thinking, safety isn't about control. It's about trust. Machines or people, it's all the same." For a while they stood there saying nothing. The wind carried the faint sound of the test track far below, rhythmic, calm, steady. For years Daniel Hart had lived in shadows, carrying a truth no one wanted to hear. Now he stood in the open, sunlight spilling across his hands. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was home. A year later, spring sunlight flooded through the new glass atrium of the Hale Cross Institute for Ethical Engineering. The ribbon had already been cut. The crowd had already applauded. Now only a few people lingered in the courtyard: journalists, students, and the 3 people whose names were engraved on the foundation plaque. Daniel stood in front of it, one hand resting against the cool metal. The inscription was simple, unpolished, honest. Truth builds what lies destroy. He traced the words with his fingertips. For years he had lived afraid of being found. Now he had built a place where truth was meant to be discovered and protected. Behind him, the laughter of children drifted through the open doors. The Institute's outreach program had invited a group of local students to visit. Their voices filled the halls where silence once ruled. Evelyn walked up beside him, clipboard in hand. "The first ethics lab opens next month," she said. "Curriculums focused on transparency, authorship, and AI accountability. Your idea?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Our idea." She gave a small laugh. "You always correct me when I say that." He shrugged. "Because it's true. Nothing good ever builds from one name." Evelyn looked at the plaque again, her reflection mingling with his. "My father would have loved this place," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "He's part of it. Every mistake he made helped us see what needed to change." They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that feels full instead of empty. Inside, sunlight poured through high skylights and across polished floors. The main atrium displayed artifacts from the early days of Crosstech, blueprints, code fragments, and photos of the original research team, including Daniel's younger self. The exhibit's final panel read, "Every invention carries the fingerprints of those who dared to care." Across the hall, Lena knelt beside a small memorial alcove. A framed photograph of her mother sat on a low pedestal surrounded by white daisies, her favorite flower. She arranged a fresh handful in the vase, whispering softly, "He did it, Mom. He finally got his name back." When Daniel found her, she looked up with a bright, teary smile. "I told you she'd like it here." He knelt beside her, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "She would have been proud of you too, you know." Lena grinned. "Maybe I'll study here when I'm older." He smiled. "You'll probably run the place." Evelyn approached quietly from behind them. "She already knows more about sensor mapping than half my interns." Lena laughed. "You should hire me then." Evelyn winked. "Give it a few years." Daniel looked at the two of them. His daughter, the last piece of his old life. Evelyn, the bridge to his new one. The weight that had haunted his shoulders for so long was gone. In its place was something steadier, lighter, peace. Later that afternoon, the 3 of them stood on the balcony overlooking the Institute's testing courtyard. Rows of solar panels gleamed under the sun. In the distance, automated vehicles ran silent safety tests, all powered by the refined algorithm that now bore the names Heart Cross Adaptive System. Evelyn rested her arms on the railing. "You ever think about how quiet it is now?" Daniel nodded. "It used to mean hiding. Now it just feels like calm." She turned to him. "Do you miss it? The fight?" He smiled softly. "No. The fight was about being heard. This," he gestured to the courtyard below, "is about being remembered for the right reasons." Lena tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, are you going to give your speech soon? Everyone's waiting." He glanced at Evelyn, who smiled. "They won't start without you." The auditorium was packed with students, engineers, and journalists. Cameras were set up along the aisles, broadcasting the opening ceremony live. Evelyn introduced him. "When I first met Daniel Hart," she began, "he wore a janitor's uniform and carried more dignity than most executives I'd ever known. Today, he carries our mission. The institute you're sitting in exists because one man refused to let fear outlive truth." Applause filled the hall. Daniel stepped up to the podium, heart steady. "I used to believe silence kept me safe," he began. "And for a while it did. But silence also built a cage. It took years and a brave child to remind me that that isn't what destroys us. It's what frees us." He glanced at Lena in the front row, her smile bright and proud. "This institute isn't about me," he continued. "It's about what happens when people decide that integrity matters more than comfort. The world runs on invention, but invention without honesty is just noise. We're here to make sure the next generation learns that what you build matters less than how you build it." He paused, the light catching the plaque behind him. "For years I lived in the dark to protect what I had left. But truth gave me peace. It gave my daughter a future that isn't built on shame, and it gave all of us a reminder that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you really are." He let the words hang in the air. Then he smiled gently. So let's build something better, not just smarter machines, but braver hearts. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Evelyn clapped hardest of all. That evening, when the crowd had gone and the lights dimmed, Evelyn found Daniel and Lena sitting outside on the grass under the soft glow of the Institute's courtyard lamps. Lena rested her head on her father's shoulder, half asleep. The plaque gleamed faintly a few steps away, its inscription catching the last of the daylight. Evelyn sat beside them. "We did it," she said quietly. Daniel looked at her, his voice warm. "We did." They watched as the Institute's glass walls reflected the stars, a structure born from ruin, standing proud on the foundation of truth. "Funny," Evelyn said, smiling faintly. "A janitor and a CEO start a revolution by telling the truth." Daniel chuckled. "Guess the world needed cleaning." She laughed softly, shaking her head. Above them, the night was calm, the city hushed. For the first time in years, neither of them felt chased by ghosts. The past had been faced. The future was theirs to build. Honestly, have you ever seen someone lose everything just to tell the truth? Because that's what this story was really about. How honesty can cost you everything, but give you back your peace. Tell me what part this story stayed with you, and where you're watching from.